I always knew Margot was a good liar. She had this effortless way of twisting a situation, making herself the victim even when she was the one holding the knife. It was one of those things I had learned to live with at first. It was harmless. A little manipulation here, a little exaggeration there, she's just dramatic, I used to tell myself. That's how she is. And for a while, I believed it that we had been married for 5 years. 5 years of passion, good times, bad times, and lately, distance. I chalked it up to stress, to work, to the natural ebb and flow of marriage. She had always been flirtatious, always loved attention, but she was my wife. I thought I knew where the line was. Then, things started to change. Margot became harder to reach. Calls went unanswered. Texts left unread. The excuses piled up. Work ran late, she was exhausted, she needed time alone. The sex slowed down, then stopped entirely. Whenever I tried to talk about it, she brushed me off. "You're overthinking," she'd say, rolling her eyes. "Not everything is about you, Max." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overthinking, until her mother told me otherwise. It happened on a Sunday. Margot had left early, claiming she had brunch plans with some old college friends she hadn't seen in years. I didn't ask questions. By then, I had learned that asking Margot too many questions only led to her making me feel like the bad guy. So I let it go. A few hours later, her mother called. Margot's mom, sweet, chatty, and completely unaware of the nuclear bomb she was about to drop on my life. "Maximilian, dear. How are you?" she asked, her usual warm tone filling the receiver. "I'm good, just at home," I said. "Margot's out with some old friends." A pause. Then, confusion. "Oh? That's odd. I thought she was with him today." I sat up straighter. My grip on the phone tightened. "With who?" Her mother laughed, like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Oh, come on, Max, you know, the man she's always with these days. The one she's been seeing all the time. She told me you were fine with it." Every muscle in my body locked. That I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "She told you what?" My voice was barely above a whisper. Silence. Then, realization hit her. "Oh, dear." I closed my eyes, inhaling slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. "Margot has a man she's been spending a lot of time with," she said carefully now, as if she had only just realized that she had made a mistake. I assumed you knew." She made it sound like you two had an understanding. An understanding. Margot had convinced her own mother that I was fine with this. That I knew. That I accepted it. I forced a laugh, light, easy, the way Margot would have done in my place. "Right. Of course." "Oh, thank goodness," her mother said, sounding relieved. "I'd hate to think I said something I shouldn't have." I kept my voice steady. "No worries at all. Listen, I have to go, but we'll talk soon, okay?" She said her goodbyes, completely unaware of the destruction she had just caused. I set the phone down and stared at the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. Margot was cheating on me, and she had been so confident in her lies, so sure that she would never get caught, that she had let her own mother believe I was in on it. That I should have been furious. I should have called her immediately, demanded answers, confronted her with the truth, but I didn't. I did something else instead. I decided to wait. I decided to pretend I knew nothing, because if Margot thought she was in control of this game, she was about to learn what it felt like to be played. I sat there for a long time after hanging up, letting the weight of it settle in. Margot was cheating. That part was clear. But what stunned me more was the ease with which she had rewritten reality, how effortlessly she had crafted a world where I was the oblivious, agreeable husband while she paraded around with another man in broad daylight. That I could have confronted her immediately. I could have called her, demanded the truth, thrown her lies in her face. But that wasn't enough. Margot had spent years controlling the narrative. Now, it was my turn. So I made a decision that I would pretend, act as if nothing had changed. Play the loving, clueless husband. Let her dig herself deeper and deeper into her own deception until there was no way out. And when the moment was right, I'd drop the hammer so hard she'd never see it coming. That evening, she came home, walking through the door like nothing was wrong. She had her usual polished, effortless look, hair perfect, makeup barely touched, smelling like expensive perfume. "Hey, babe," she said, tossing her purse onto the counter. "What did you do today?" I smiled. "Easy, natural. Just the usual." "How was brunch?" She stretched, letting out a small yawn. "Oh, you know, the same old thing. Just catching up." I watched her closely. Not a single hesitation. Not even a flicker of guilt. Margot was good. Too good, but I was better. I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around her waist, pressing a slow kiss to her neck. I felt her body stiffen just slightly before she leaned into it. "I missed you," I murmured. She laughed lightly, turning in my arms to press a kiss to my lips. "Missed you too." My hands slid lower, lingering at her hips. "You look incredible," I murmured. "I was thinking we could spend some time together tonight." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ugh, I wish," she sighed, leaning her head against my shoulder. "I'm exhausted. We walked so much today. My feet are killing me." I ran my hands along her back, resting my chin on her head. "Of course. You should rest." She relaxed in my hold, completely unaware that I knew everything, and that was the moment I realized something. Margot didn't just think she was smarter than me. She thought I was a fool. She thought I would never figure it out, and that made this even better. Over the next few days, I played my role perfectly. I didn't question her late nights. Didn't comment when she left the room to take her calls. Didn't react when she came home wearing the same perfume, but a different kind of energy, like she was glowing with a satisfaction that had nothing to do with me. And the more comfortable she got, the more reckless she became. She left her phone unattended more often. She got sloppier with her lies, forgetting which excuse she had already used, and then, she made her first real mistake. A text that I saw it light up her phone while she was in the shower. "Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you." I stared at it, heartbeat steady, mind completely clear. Margot was mine to break. I just had to wait for the perfect moment. I stared at the message on Margot's phone, my pulse steady, my mind cold and calculating. "Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you." A name wasn't attached. Just a number. But that didn't matter. I already knew exactly what it meant. Margot had made her first mistake. She had gotten comfortable. Too confident. She thought she was untouchable, that I was too blind or too trusting to notice. She had convinced herself that I was oblivious, and that was the best part, because I wasn't just going to confront her. No, that would be too easy. Too simple. She would cry, spin some ridiculous excuse, make me out to be the bad guy for not trusting her. I had seen her do it to others before. Margot never admitted defeat. So instead, I was going to let her believe she was still in control, let her lie. Let her cheat. Let her dig herself so deep into her own deception that when I finally flipped the script, she would have nowhere left to run. The bathroom door opened, steam rolling out into the bedroom as Margot walked in, wrapped in a towel. She looked at me sitting on the bed, scrolling through my phone like nothing was wrong. Like I hadn't just seen undeniable proof of her affair. She smiled, tilting her head. "What are you looking at?" I held up my phone. "Just thinking about dinner. What do you feel like eating tonight?" She hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, not because she thought I had seen anything but because she wanted to check her own phone. Because she was waiting for a response from him, but she didn't move toward it. Instead, she forced a casual shrug. "Anything, really. I don't care." I smiled. "How about Italian?" "Sounds great," she said, walking over to her dresser, her back to me, and then, as subtly as she could, she glanced at her phone. I caught the flicker of tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tightened slightly against the towel. she saw the message. Her movements were precise, careful. She picked up the phone, tapped the screen, probably clearing the notification before I could accidentally see it. Then, she slipped it into her bag, like it had never happened, like she had nothing to hide. That I bit back a smirk. She still thought she was winning, but she had no idea that I had already started the game. For the next week, I watched Margot closely. She was careful deleting messages, keeping her phone glued to her side, making sure she always had an excuse ready, but she didn't realize that I was already 10 steps ahead. That I started staying later at work. Mentioning plans with friends. I made sure to seem just distracted enough, just uninvolved enough that she felt like she had even more freedom, and it worked. She started coming home later. Leaving early. Smiling at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She thought she was safe, she thought I was a fool. And then, the perfect opportunity arrived. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up again. This time, I didn't just read the message. That I picked up her phone, turned it over in my hand, and made a decision that I was going to meet the man who thought he could take what was mine. And I was going to make sure Margot never forgot what happened when she tried to play me. Margot's phone was still warm from her touch when I picked it up. Same place tomorrow? Can't wait to see you again. Perfect. That I placed the phone back exactly as it was, making sure she'd never suspect a thing. Then, I smiled to myself. She thought she had everything under control. She thought I was still the clueless, devoted husband. But tomorrow, I was going to be there, watching. Waiting, and Margot wouldn't see me coming. The next evening, I left the house before Margot. Told her I had a work meeting. She barely paid attention, too busy texting on her phone, smiling to herself. She thought she was free. That I parked 2 blocks away from the restaurant mentioned in the text. A quiet, upscale place, dim lighting, intimate booths, the kind of setting where secrets were meant to stay hidden. And then, I saw her. Margot walked in, dressed in that extra way she only did when she wanted to impress. Her hair perfect, lips painted red, her smile wide as she scanned the room. Then, she found him, tall. Well-dressed. Confident. He stood to greet her, his hands settling too easily on the small of her back as she leaned in, and just like that, all the lies she had told me unraveled in real time. I exhaled slowly, my hands steady. I didn't move. Didn't storm in. I was going to let this play out, let her believe she was untouchable, because the longer she thought she was winning, the harder she'd fall. When I finally decided to strike, I stayed in the shadows, watching as Margot laughed, leaned in close, touched his arm like she had once touched mine. It was all so effortless for her, so natural. They ordered wine, shared a plate, whispered things I couldn't hear. And yet, I didn't feel anger. Not yet, because she still thought she was winning. I pulled out my phone, snapped a few pictures, her hand on his, her lips close to his ear, the undeniable proof of her betrayal. Then, I sent her a text. Me, hey babe, just finished my meeting. Want me to pick up dinner? I watched her reaction closely. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, her smile faltering just slightly. Then, with a practiced ease, she turned the screen face down, laughing at something he said. She didn't even bother to reply. I smiled to myself. That was all I needed to know. Margot was too deep in her lies. Too confident. Too sure that she could keep playing both sides, and that meant she'd never see what was coming next. I let her enjoy her night. Let her sip her wine, let her lean into him, let her pretend that her world wasn't about to collapse. When she finally left the restaurant, I followed at a safe distance. She didn't go home. Of course, she didn't. She went to his place. I watched from my car as she walked inside without hesitation. No second-guessing. No guilt. She was comfortable here. This wasn't new, she had done this before. I clenched my jaw, exhaling slowly. Not yet. This wasn't the moment. Instead, I pulled out my phone and sent her another message. Me, long night? I'm heading to bed. Love you. A minute passed. Then 2. Then 5. No response. I smirked, shaking my head. She really thought she had me fooled, but I was done playing along. Soon, Margot would know exactly what it felt like to be blindsided. Margot didn't text me back that night. I didn't expect her to. She was too wrapped up in her secret life, too distracted by the thrill of deception to worry about me, and that was fine, because while she was tangled in another man's sheets, I was setting the stage for her downfall. The next morning, she came home looking refreshed, her hair was brushed, her clothes changed, but I noticed the small details: the faint scent of his cologne clinging to her skin, the slight smudge of lipstick at the corner of her mouth. She walked into the kitchen where I was making coffee, stretching like she had just woken up. "Morning," she said casually, as if she hadn't spent the night betraying me. I turned, gave her an easy smile. "Morning, gorgeous." She leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek before grabbing a mug. "What time did you get in last night?" The audacity of her. She was testing me, seeing if I'd catch on, if I'd question her. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Not too late. Work ran longer than I thought." She hummed, taking a sip of her own drink, her body language completely relaxed. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't guilty, because in her mind, she had already won, and that's exactly what I wanted her to think. Over the next week, I made sure to stay predictable. No changes in routine, no confrontations, no sudden questions that might raise suspicion. And Margot, she continued her affair without hesitation. I watched her lie to me every day, telling me she had dinner with her girlfriends when she was really in his bed, claiming she was exhausted from work while she spent her nights tangled up with another man. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger. But what she didn't know was that I had already started pulling the strings. I followed her again. Not every time, just enough to confirm a pattern. Tuesday. Thursday. Saturday. Always the same schedule. Always the same man. She was comfortable in her deception, completely unaware that I was documenting every step she took. And the more I watched, the more I realized something: she wasn't just having an affair, she was planning her exit point. One night, while she was in the shower, I unlocked her laptop. Margot was smart. She deleted texts, kept her phone locked, but she wasn't perfect. She had an email open. I scanned the words, my stomach twisting, not from pain, not from heartbreak, but from something sharper. "Margot, I'm working on it. It'll take time, but I'll get there. I just don't want to keep hiding. You know I want more with you, Margot, I know. Just trust me. He won't see it coming." I inhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. She wasn't just cheating, she was stringing him along too, convincing him that I was nothing more than an obstacle in her way. She was planning to leave, but not until she got what she wanted, and I had a feeling I knew exactly what that was. The next morning, I tested her. "Margot," I said over breakfast, watching her carefully. "What do you think about looking at new places? Maybe something bigger?" She blinked, caught off guard for just a second. Then, she smiled. "Really? You'd want that?" I nodded. "Why not? We've talked about upgrading before." She looked thoughtful, then reached for my hand, squeezing it. "I love that idea." Liar. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She wasn't thinking about us moving. She was thinking about her moving into something bigger, better, something she could secure before she finally decided to walk away. And now I knew, Margot was waiting for the perfect moment to leave me. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't going to give her the chance. I was going to let her believe she had won, let her think she had everything under control, and when the time was right, I was going to destroy every single plan she had. Margot thought she had me exactly where she wanted, naive, loving, completely unaware. She had no idea that every word she spoke, every lie she told, was tightening the noose around her own neck. I watched her carefully. Studied her every move. She had been careful before, but now that she thought she was close to getting what she wanted, she was getting reckless. More late nights. More excuses. More time spent staring at her phone with that smug little smile, thinking I was none the wiser. She wasn't just preparing to leave me, she was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. So, I gave it to her. The next weekend, I made my move. "Hey, Margot," I said one evening, watching her as she scrolled through her phone, pretending to be so invested in whatever fake story she'd made up for me this time. "I need to go out of town for a few days." She looked up, blinking. "Really? Why?" "Work conference," I lied smoothly. "Short notice, but it's important. She hesitated just for a second, calculating, weighing her options. Then, she smiled. That's exciting. When do you leave? Friday. Another pause. Then, she nodded. I'll miss you, she said, reaching for my hand. Liar, she wasn't thinking about me. She was thinking about how much time she'd have alone. How she'd finally get to play house with him without having to sneak around, that I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She thought this was it, her chance, and that was exactly what I wanted her to believe. Friday came, and I packed a bag just enough to make it look convincing. Kissed her goodbye. Told her I loved her. She smiled sweetly, watching me walk out the door. The moment I was gone, she thought she was free. What she didn't know was that I was still in town, watching, waiting, letting her dig her grave a little deeper, and when the time was right, I was going to bury her in it. That I didn't go far. Instead of leaving town, I parked a few blocks away from our house, far enough that Margot wouldn't notice. I watched. I waited, and right on cue, she proved me right. Barely an hour after I left, she was on the move. Dressed up. Perfume on. The kind of effort she hadn't made for me in months. I followed her at a distance, heart steady, mind clear. She wasn't cautious anymore. She thought she had won. She drove straight to his place, too comfortable, too at home, walking right in like she belonged there, and that was it. The final confirmation: Margot wasn't just cheating. She had moved on. I stayed long enough to be sure, long enough to see the lights go on, long enough to know she wouldn't be home anytime soon. Then, I turned my car around and headed back to our house, because now it was time to set the final stage. Inside, I worked quickly. Margot had no idea that I had been preparing for this moment for weeks. That I had already contacted a lawyer. That I had already started the paperwork. That every lie she told, every secret she thought she was keeping, had been building toward this. By the time she returned, our house would no longer be hers, her accounts frozen, her access revoked. Her lies laid bare, and the best part, she wouldn't see it coming, because when Margot walked through that door, expecting everything to be just as she left it, expecting me to still be her safety net, she'd find nothing waiting for her, nothing except the consequences of her own betrayal. Margot had no idea that the life she had carefully built on lies was about to collapse while she was in his bed. I was making sure she had nothing to come home to. I packed her belongings, not neatly, not carefully, but just enough to let her know that she was no longer welcome. Clothes, shoes, makeup, all thrown into boxes and bags. I didn't bother separating anything. She didn't deserve that courtesy. Then, I changed the locks. Her bank accounts frozen, her credit cards cancelled, the legal documents filed. Every step was calculated. Every move was designed to leave her with nothing. And then, I waited. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Margot finally came home. I stood in the living room, calm, steady, watching the front door as I heard her heels click against the pavement. The handle turned, she pushed, the door didn't budge. Confused, she tried again. Then, she knocked. Lightly at first, then harder. Max? Open the door. I took my time. Walked over slowly, unlocking it with a deliberate click before pulling it open just enough to meet her eyes. She was smiling, relieved, like she expected me to wrap my arms around her, like I hadn't just wiped her existence out of this house. But the moment she looked past me and saw the boxes stacked neatly behind me, her face dropped, her mask cracked. What is this?" she asked, her voice quieter now that I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Your things." She blinked. "What?" I tilted my head, giving her a slow, knowing smirk. "I know, Margot." Her breath hitched. "Know what?" I laughed. "Oh, don't do that. Don't insult me. You know exactly what I'm talking about." Her mouth opened, closed, then she shook her head quickly, her voice rising. "Max, I don't understand." I stepped aside, gesturing to the packed boxes. "Then let me make it clear for you. You're done here. Your things are outside. Your bank accounts? Frozen. Your credit cards? Cancelled. Your name? No longer tied to this house. Your affair? No longer a secret. She froze, her face drained of color, and for the first time, I saw it fear, not sadness. Not regret, fear, because for once in her life, Margot wasn't in control and she had no idea what to do next. Margot stood there, completely still. The woman who had spent months deceiving me, who had lied with a straight face, who had convinced herself she would never get caught. She looked utterly lost, her lips parted slightly, searching for words, searching for anything that could undo this. Max, we can talk about this, she tried, her voice softer now, carefully controlled. That I smirked. Oh, now you want to talk? That's funny, Margot. Because I gave you plenty of chances before. And what did you do? I gestured to the boxes. You packed your bags. You just didn't realize I'd be the one helping you move out. Her breath hitched. I didn't what? I cut in, stepping closer. Didn't mean to cheat. Didn't mean to lie. Didn't mean to tell your little boyfriend that I wouldn't see it coming. Her face crumbled for the first time. She knew that I had seen everything. Max, please, she whispered, her voice shaking now. I was confused. I let out a slow, sharp laugh. Confused? You weren't confused when you walked into his house last night. You weren't confused when you kissed him, when you let him touch you, when you spent the entire night in his bed. She flinched. Good. Let it hurt. But I love you, she choked out suddenly, stepping closer, reaching for me like she could still fix this. It was a mistake. I took a step back. No, Margot. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did? That was a choice, asterisk, she exhaled shakily, looking over her shoulder, like she expected him to come save her, but she was alone, completely and utterly alone, and now, she finally knew what that felt like. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. That I shrugged. Not my problem. Then, I reached for the door and slammed it in her face. The moment the door slammed, the pounding started. Max. Margot's voice was sharp, panicked. Max, open the door. I stood on the other side, arms crossed, unmoving. Letting her feel it, letting her sit in the consequences she never thought would come. We can talk about this, she shouted. You don't have to do this. I smirked to myself. Oh, but I do. For months, she had controlled the narrative. Had twisted reality in her favor. Had made me feel like I was the fool. Now, she was the one left standing in the cold. Another pound on the door. Please, Max. You love me. I tilted my head at that one. Do I? I had loved the idea of her. The woman she pretended to be. But the woman standing outside? The liar, the manipulator, the woman who had spent months betraying me without an ounce of guilt. I felt nothing for her anymore. Max, just let me explain. I leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. Then, I spoke calm, steady, completely in control. You already did, Margot. Every time you snuck out. Every time you lied to my face. Every time you let another man touch you. That was your explanation, asterisk, silence, then, a single choked sob. She was breaking. Good. I have nowhere to go, she whispered, her voice trembling. That I smiled. Not my problem. Then, I turned off the porch light and walked away. Margot had spent months thinking she was untouchable. Now, she was nothing. That I stood inside, just beyond the door, listening. Margot wasn't leaving. Not yet. She had nowhere to go, and that thought alone was enough to keep her frozen on the other side of the wood, pacing back and forth on the porch like a caged animal. That I heard the way her breath hitched, the way her voice faltered as she muttered to herself, trying to piece together a plan. This can't be happening. She whispered. No, this wasn't supposed to happen like this. There it was, that tiny glimpse of the truth. She wasn't devastated because she had been caught. She wasn't falling apart because she had betrayed me, she was panicking because she had lost control. That I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, breathing slow and even. Let her sweat. Let her feel the weight of it. Let her world unravel just like she unraveled mine. Then, another knock. Softer, gentler. A different tactic. "Max," she called through the door, her voice trembling, "careful. Please, just open the door so we can talk." I didn't answer. "I messed up," she admitted, barely above a whisper now. "But you have to understand I didn't mean for it to happen like this." I smiled. There it was. The wording, she wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry for the way it ended, she was sorry she got caught, that I took my time walking to the door, making sure she heard my slow, measured steps. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady, controlled, exactly the opposite of what she wanted to hear. "You weren't planning to stay with me, Margot. You were waiting for the right time to leave. I just got there first." Silence. A long, empty silence that stretched between us like a canyon, then, a shaky breath from the other side. "That's not true," I smirked. "I read your emails, Margot. I saw the messages. I know everything." Another pause. A sharp inhale. The sound of her body sliding down the door, her weight collapsing against it. "Max, please, don't do this. I'll make it up to you. I'll prove that I love you." And there it was, the last resort. When lies failed, Margot always turned to seduction. She had done it in arguments before, soft touches, slow kisses, the kind of charm that made me forget why I was upset in the first place, but not this time. I pulled the door open just enough to see her sitting on the porch steps, mascara smudged, perfect hair now a mess, her pristine, carefully constructed image cracking piece by piece. She looked up at me with wide, pleading eyes. "I know I messed up, Max," she whispered, her voice raw now. "But you can't just throw everything away. We built a life together." I let out a slow breath, staring down at the woman I had once loved. "No, Margot. I built a life. You set it on fire." Her lip trembled, her hand reaching toward mine, but I pulled back before she could touch me, her face twisted, desperation flickering into something sharper. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice breaking, her breath quickening. I nodded toward her packed boxes. "Figure it out." She let out a sharp, humorless laugh, wiping her face, a flash of her old arrogance slipping through. "You think I won't land on my feet? You think I need you?" I leaned against the doorframe, my voice low and certain. "No, Margot. I think you need control. And for the first time, you don't have any." She sucked in a breath, her hands tightening into fists. For the first time in our entire marriage, Margot had nothing to hold over me. No excuse to twist, no manipulation to play, no way to worm her way back in. She had spent months playing with my life. Now, she had to live in the wreckage of her own choices. I stepped back inside, met her eyes one last time, and let the door close between us. The door clicked shut with finality. I stood still for a moment, listening, waiting. Outside, Margot didn't move. She didn't knock again. She didn't yell. She just sat there. I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to watch her. She was curled up on the porch steps, her arms wrapped around herself, her once pristine appearance now completely unraveling. Her hands were gripping her phone, but she wasn't using it, because she knew, she wasn't texting him. She wasn't calling anyone, because there was no one left to save her. For the first time in her life, Margot had nothing to control, no narrative to twist, no one to pull into her orbit with a well-placed lie, and she looked lost. I let the curtain drop and walked away. She wasn't my problem anymore. I wasn't going to waste another second feeling sorry for a woman who had spent months playing with my life like it was a game. Instead, I grabbed a glass of water, sat down at the kitchen table, and exhaled, really, truly exhaled, as if I had been holding my breath for months without realizing it. For the first time in forever, I felt free. No more pretending. No more doubts. No more Margot. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages, and I smiled to myself, because I knew Margot was sitting outside, staring at her own phone, desperately hoping that I would give her another chance. She was waiting for the thing she always relied on, my weakness for her, but she had miscalculated because she didn't realize that the version of me who would have fallen for her tears was already gone. The night stretched on, but I didn't go back to check on her. Eventually, I heard a car pull up. A door opened. A pause, then a quiet, hesitant slam as it closed again, then silence. I didn't get up to watch her leave. I didn't need to. I already knew that when I woke up in the morning, she'd be gone, and she wouldn't be coming back. I never saw Margot again. I heard things. Of course, she moved in with him for a while, tried to play house, but it didn't last. Turns out, men who chase married women don't usually make great long-term partners. The fantasy shattered. She bounced around after that, burned through money, burned through jobs, burned through people the way she always had, until finally, the life she had planned for herself collapsed. Then, one day, an email came, "I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, not feeling anger, not even feeling hate, just nothing. Margot had spent years controlling me, manipulating me, convincing me that I needed her, and now, she was nothing but a forgotten chapter in a book I had already closed. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I had finally learned the most valuable lesson of all: when someone shows you who they really are, believe them and never, ever, let them back in. Months passed. Seasons changed. Life moved forward, and Margot became nothing more than a distant memory. I had expected the anger to last longer, the betrayal to sting every time I thought about it. But as the weeks stretched on, I realized something surprising. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel haunted. I felt relieved, because for the first time in years, I was living in a world without deception. Without manipulation. Without a woman who had built her life on lies and expected me to play along. I had escaped her, but Margot had not escaped herself. It happened on a random evening. A long day at work, a quiet dinner at home, my phone buzzing as I sat on the couch. I didn't recognize the number at first. But the moment I saw the message, I knew. "Margot, I know you hate me. But please, just talk to me." I stared at the screen, my stomach turning, not with nerves, not with regret, but with something far colder, because I had expected her to move on. To vanish into the wreckage she had created. But some people don't know how to exist unless they have control. Margot had spent her whole life pulling people into her web, convincing them they needed her, playing the role of the irreplaceable woman. And now she was realizing that I had walked away without a second thought, and that was killing her more than anything else. She sent another message: "Margot, I made mistakes. But you're the only person who ever really understood me." I smirked, shaking my head. Even now, she was trying to pull me back in, not with apologies. Not with guilt, but with flattery, like I was stupid enough to believe that I had been some special exception in her life, like I hadn't watched her lie to me for months, like I didn't already know exactly who she was. I could have responded. I could have typed out all the things I had wanted to say, all the words she would never be able to twist this time, but instead, I did something better. I blocked her number. Then, I turned off my phone, and for the first time in a long time, I went to bed at peace. Without Margot, because in the end, she wasn't the ghost that haunted me. I was the ghost that would haunt her, for the rest of her life.